The accusation, when it came, was a masterpiece of corporate violence. Swift, silent, and utterly devastating. One moment, Roshan was the golden child of Apex Solutions, a brilliant senior executive on the fast track to partnership. The next, she stood in the glass-walled office of her mentor, Marcus Thorne, the world dissolving into the sound of his voice, each word a carefully placed explosive charge. Embezzlement, Maya. The auditors found it. A series of untraceable wire transfers, routed through a shell corporation, all originating from your terminal under your credentials. Maya stared at him, her mind a frantic scramble of denial. Marcus, that's impossible. You know me. I would never. I thought I did, he said. His expression a mask of profound disappointment. It was the disappointment that shattered her more than the accusation. For 10 years, Marcus had been her champion, the one who saw her potential and guided her ascent from junior analyst to his right hand. He was more than a boss. He was a surrogate father, the architect of her career. Look at the evidence, he continued, sliding a folder across his vast mahogany desk. It was filled with transaction logs and encrypted account numbers, a language she was fluent in, but now it read like gibberish. Her mind reeled back to a week ago, when she'd stumbled upon a similar anomaly. A single massive outflow to an obscure security firm she didn't recognize. When she had brought it to Marcus, he had been dismissive, assuring her it was a legacy payment from a classified merger, something he would handle personally. He had told her to forget about it. Now that single transaction had multiplied, metastasized into a career-ending disaster, and it was all being laid at her feet. I didn't do this, she whispered, her voice trembling. Someone is setting me up. Marcus sighed, the sound heavy with a sorrow that felt expertly rehearsed. I have to suspend you, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Please, for your own sake, don't make a scene. The walk from his office to the elevator was a gauntlet of shame. Faces that had smiled at her that morning now turned away or stared with morbid curiosity. Her work phone was deactivated remotely. Her access card was confiscated. Within 15 minutes, her entire professional life was erased. She was cast out a pariah. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, public humiliation, and collapsing friendships. The story leaked to the financial press, painting her as a greedy, backstabbing executive. Colleagues she had considered friends stopped returning her calls. The life she had meticulously built, a life of 16-hour workdays, sacrificed relationships, and unwavering loyalty, had been a house of cards, and Marcus had just blown it down. She lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her savings, all drained by legal fees defending herself against a crime she couldn't disprove. The evidence was too perfect, too clean. She had been surgically excised from the corporate world. Broken and destitute, she left the city, retreating to the small, quiet house her grandmother had left her on the other side of the country. For months, she was adrift in a sea of grief and rage. The betrayal was a physical wound, a constant ache in her chest. It was during a long, sleepless night, staring at the ceiling of her new, small life, that the grief finally began to cool, hardening into something else. It was a cold, clear, diamond-hard resolve. Marcus had not just fired her. He had tried to erase her. He had underestimated her. He thought she was just a product of his mentorship, a reflection of his own brilliance. He had forgotten that before he had found her, she had been a survivor, a fighter. She would not be erased. She would not be a victim. She would reinvent herself. And one day she would return. Not as Maya Roshan, the disgraced executive, but as someone else, a ghost from a past he thought he had buried. And she would take back everything he had stolen from her, and then she would take everything from him. The plan began to form, not in a flash of anger, but as a slow, meticulous blueprint for revenge. The city of Portland was a world away from the cutthroat, high-stakes finance hub she had fled. The air smelled of rain and pine, a constant cleansing wash that felt like a baptism. Here Maya Roshan ceased to exist. In her place, a new woman was born, Nora Shaw. The name felt anonymous, strong, a blank slate on which to write a new story. Her first year was a lesson in humility. The remnants of her grandmother's legacy barely covered the deposit on a tiny walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that buzzed with the energy of artists and baristas. Her bespoke suits were replaced with thrift store jeans, her expense account lunches with instant noodles. She took a job waiting tables at a high-end restaurant, the irony not lost on her as she served the very type of people she once was. The work was grueling, but it was also a shield. The physical exhaustion kept the demons of her past at bay during the day. But at night they came roaring back. Sleep offered no escape, filled with nightmares of echoing accusations and Marcus's disappointed eyes. It was in these dark, lonely hours that she allowed the rage to burn. She didn't try to extinguish it. Instead, she channeled it. Every dollar she saved from her tips went into her education. She enrolled in online courses not in finance, but in disciplines Marcus had always dismissed as soft sciences. Behavioral economics, organizational psychology, data analytics, and brand strategy. She devoured books on corporate warfare, market disruption, and Sun Tzu's The Art of War. She wasn't just re-educating herself. She was forging a new arsenal of weapons, ones that Marcus wouldn't see coming. She studied Apex Solutions from afar, like a predator tracking its prey. She read their quarterly reports, analyzed their client acquisitions, and dissected their marketing campaigns. She knew their playbook because she had helped write it. And from her remote vantage point, she began to see the flaws in Marcus's strategy, cracks in the fortress she had once helped to build. Apex was a monolith, powerful and respected, but slow, arrogant, and increasingly complacent. Marcus focused on legacy clients, the big, slow-moving corporations, relying on his reputation and long-standing relationships. He was a master of the old guard, but blind to the new wave of tech startups and agile, data-driven companies reshaping the business landscape. His company offered one-size-fits-all solutions in a world crying out for bespoke, adaptive strategies. That was his weakness. That was her opening. After 2 years of waiting tables and studying until her eyes blurred, Nora took the next step. She secured a small business loan by leveraging a meticulously researched, brilliantly articulated business plan. She founded a new consultancy firm, Phoenix Strategy, a private vow to herself of what she intended to do: rise from the ashes of the life Marcus had burned down. Phoenix Strategy was the anti-Apex. Her office was a shared workspace, not a skyscraper. Her team was a small, hand-picked group of hungry, innovative thinkers fluent in the language of the new economy. They didn't wear suits. They wore hoodies and jeans. They valued data over dogma, agility over size. Her business model was her masterstroke. Instead of targeting Apex's blue-chip clients, she went after the disruptors, the companies Apex dismissed as too small or too volatile. She offered them something Marcus never could: a partnership. She embedded Phoenix strategists within their teams, using her unique blend of financial acumen and psychological insight to help them not just grow, but outmaneuver their larger competitors. She didn't just offer consulting. She offered a competitive edge, turning Phoenix into an indispensable part of their success. For 3 years, Nora worked in the trenches, building Phoenix brick by brick. She was relentless, focused, and driven by a singular, cold purpose. She built a reputation for delivering spectacular results, for seeing around corners, for turning underdogs into market leaders. The name Nora Shaw began to generate buzz in tech circles and venture capital firms. She was the new wunderkind, a strategic visionary with a Midas touch. She avoided the spotlight, cultivating an air of mystery. There were no splashy magazine profiles, no keynote speeches. She let the work speak for itself. Her new identity was complete. Roshan was a ghost, a forgotten casualty of a long-ago scandal. Nora Shaw was a force to be reckoned with. Finally, the day came. One of her clients, a fast-growing biotech firm, had just been acquired by a major pharmaceutical giant, a legacy client of Apex Solutions. During the merger, the parent company was so impressed by Phoenix's work that they invited Nora to bid for a company-wide strategic overhaul project. It was the invitation she had been waiting for. The project was a direct challenge to Apex's oldest and most lucrative account. She was no longer a ghost haunting Marcus's world. She was at the gate. And she was about to kick it down. The years of planning, the nights fueled by rage and coffee, the meticulous construction of her new life. It had all led to this. The game was about to begin. The meeting was set on neutral ground, in the boardroom of the pharmaceutical giant, Omnicorp. It was the first time in 5 years that she would be in the same room as Marcus Thorne. Walking into that room was like stepping into a time warp. The scent of expensive coffee, muted corporate art, the low hum of power, it was all achingly familiar. Nora, however, was a stranger. She had altered her appearance subtly but effectively. Her once long dark hair was now cut in a sharp asymmetrical bob, dyed a sophisticated auburn. Designer glasses framed her eyes, making them seem colder, more analytical. Her wardrobe was minimalist, expensive, and radiated quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the eager-to-please ambition of Roshan. Marcus was already there, holding court with the Omnicorp executives. He looked older, his face etched with faint lines of stress, but he still possessed the same easy, commanding presence. When Nora was introduced, his eyes scanned her with polite, professional interest, but there was not a flicker of recognition. To him, she was just another competitor. The realization sent a thrill of cold, pure power through her. Her new identity was the perfect camouflage. The meeting began with Marcus's presentation. It was classic Apex. Polished, professional, and profoundly uninspired. He presented a thick binder filled with charts and projections, outlining a conservative 5-year plan focused on cost-cutting and consolidating market share. He spoke of stability and legacy, the presentation of a king defending his castle. Then it was Nora's turn. She didn't use a binder. She walked to the front and activated the smartboard with a tap of her finger. Her presentation was a dynamic, data-driven narrative. She didn't talk about consolidating the past. She talked about conquering the future. Omnicorp isn't just a pharmaceutical company, she began, her voice calm and authoritative. It's a data company that happens to sell medicine. Your most valuable, under-leveraged asset is the vast trove of clinical and consumer data you collect. Apex wants to help you manage your legacy. Phoenix Strategy will help you weaponize your data to predict market trends, personalize patient outreach, and leapfrog your competitors in the race for next-generation therapeutics. She laid out a bold, aggressive strategy, showcasing Phoenix's mastery of predictive analytics and machine learning. It was a language the Omnicorp board, increasingly nervous about nimble biotech startups, was desperate to hear. She knew every one of Omnicorp's operational weaknesses and strategic anxieties because she had studied them for years, anticipating this very moment. As she spoke, the energy in the room shifted. The executives leaned forward, captivated. Marcus's confident smile tightened at the edges. He was no longer looking at a competitor. He was looking at an existential threat. The first blow landed a week later when Omnicorp announced it was awarding the strategic overhaul contract to Phoenix Strategy. The news sent a shockwave through the industry. Apex Solutions hadn't just lost a client. It had lost its most prestigious, longest-held account. It was a public vote of no confidence, a signal that the old guard was faltering. But Nora wasn't finished. Part of her strategy involved poaching top talent. She knew from her time at Apex that Marcus, for all his talk of mentorship, was a tyrant who often took credit for his team's best work. There was one person in particular she had in her sights. David Chen, a brilliant but chronically underappreciated data scientist. David was the true architect behind Apex's most successful predictive models, a fact Marcus had always downplayed. Nora approached David not with a generic offer, but with a challenge. She showed him the work Phoenix was doing for Omnicorp, the complex, cutting-edge data problems they were solving. She offered him not just a massive salary increase, but the chance to lead his own research division, to have his name on his work, to finally get the recognition he deserved. David's resignation was a devastating blow to Apex. He wasn't just a key employee. He was the engine room of their entire analytics department. His departure, and the fact that he went to the upstart firm that had just stolen their biggest client, created a narrative of an exodus, of a sinking ship. Other talented but frustrated Apex employees started quietly sending their resumes to Phoenix. Marcus was now bleeding, and Nora was ready to strike again. She knew his pride was his Achilles heel. He would see the loss of OmniCorp not as a strategic failure, but as a personal insult. He would be angry, distracted, and prone to mistakes. Using her insider knowledge of Apex's project pipeline, she knew their next big move was the launch of a proprietary financial software suite, Apex Vantage, which they had been developing for years. It was meant to be their answer to the changing market. Nora had a secret weapon. During her final year at Apex, she had written the initial scoping document for Vantage. She knew its architecture, its features, and most importantly, its critical flaws: a clunky user interface and an inability to integrate seamlessly with newer cloud-based platforms. 6 months before Apex Vantage was scheduled to launch, Phoenix Strategy released Aura, its own business intelligence software. Aura was everything Vantage wasn't. It was sleek, intuitive, cloud-native, and powered by a more sophisticated AI. It was also offered as a flexible, subscription-based service, a stark contrast to Apex's expensive, long-term licensing model. Aura didn't just compete with Vantage. It made it obsolete before it even hit the market. Nora had effectively anticipated and preempted her rival's biggest strategic move in years. The Vantage launch was a disaster. The market, now captivated by Aura, saw it as a relic. The financial press was brutal, calling Apex a lumbering dinosaur struggling to keep up. The company's stock took a nosedive. The board, once Marcus's loyal allies, began to whisper. For the first time, the king looked vulnerable in his own castle. Nora watched the fallout from her quiet, minimalist office, a small, cold smile on her lips. She had crippled his business, stolen his clients, and poached his talent. She had dismantled his professional reputation piece by piece. But the true masterpiece of her revenge was yet to come. It was time to remind Marcus Thorne and the world of the crime that had started it all. It was time to destroy the man himself. The final act of Nora's revenge was not about business. It was about justice. For 5 years, she had carried the secret of Marcus's betrayal, a cold, heavy stone in her heart. While building Phoenix, she had devoted a small, secret part of her resources to a single objective: finding the money he had stolen and proving he had framed her. She hired a forensic cybersecurity firm in Tel Aviv, a group of ex-intelligence operatives who specialized in untangling the world's most complex digital crimes. She gave them her starting point: the anomalous transaction for the obscure security firm she had found years ago. It was a single thread, but she knew that if they pulled it hard enough, the entire tapestry of Marcus's deceit would unravel. For months, they worked in the digital shadows, following the money through a labyrinth of shell corporations, encrypted servers, and dark web money laundering services. Finally, they found it. The stolen funds hadn't just vanished. Marcus had used them to cover massive personal losses from a series of disastrously leveraged trades. He had set fire to his own ship and thrown Maya overboard to save himself. The cybersecurity team compiled their findings into a single encrypted file, a complete, irrefutable digital trail of Marcus's crime, from the initial data breach that compromised Maya's credentials to the final deposit into his hidden accounts. It was the bullet for her silver gun. By now, Apex Solutions was in a death spiral. The stock was at an all-time low, clients were leaving in droves, and the board was in open revolt. They had scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss Marcus's future as CEO. It was the perfect moment to strike. Nora didn't leak the information to the press. A public scandal would be messy and unpredictable. Her revenge was a corporate execution. It had to be clean, precise, and final. The day of the board meeting, she sent a package to each of the 7 board members at their private homes. The packages contained 2 items. The first was a formal, aggressive takeover bid for Apex Solutions from Phoenix Strategy, offering to buy the failing company for pennies on the dollar, saving it from total collapse. The offer was contingent on the immediate and unconditional removal of Marcus Thorne. The second item was a simple, elegant USB drive. On it was the complete, unassailable evidence of Marcus's embezzlement and the elaborate frame job he had orchestrated 5 years earlier. A note signed by Nora Shaw read, "Apex's foundational rot started at the top. It's time to rebuild on solid ground." Nora timed her arrival at the Apex Tower for 30 minutes after the packages were delivered. She no longer needed to hide. She strode through the lobby, her heels clicking with authority on the marble floor, and took the elevator to the executive suite. She didn't have to force her way into the boardroom. The door was opened by a grim-faced board member. Inside, the scene was utter devastation. The takeover offer was on the table, a lifeline they couldn't afford to refuse. The evidence of Marcus's crimes glowed from their tablets. Marcus was standing by the window, his back to the room, looking out over a city that was no longer his. When he turned and saw her, his face went pale, his composure finally shattering. The way she held her head, the intensity in her eyes. He wasn't looking at Nora Shaw, the rival CO. He was seeing the ghost of Maya Roshan, the brilliant, loyal protégé he had destroyed. "You," he whispered, the single word a cocktail of disbelief and horror. "Me," she said, her voice devoid of triumph, filled only with the cold, quiet finality of a debt settled. "You taught me that in business you have to be willing to make the hard cuts. You just never thought you'd be the one on the chopping block." The board members stared, the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The mysterious rise of Nora Shaw, her uncanny ability to anticipate Apex's every move, the surgical precision of her attacks. It all made sense now. There was no negotiation. The board voted unanimously. Marcus Thorne was fired. His severance and stock options revoked. Security was called to escort him from the building, a mirror image of Maya's humiliating exit 5 years prior. Only this time, he left with the certainty of a federal investigation awaiting him. Nora watched as he was led away, a broken man stripped of his power, reputation, and freedom. She felt no joy, no elation. Only the quiet, profound satisfaction of a complex architectural plan perfectly executed. The building had been condemned, its corrupt foundation exposed, and it had been brought down with methodical grace. An hour later, Nora stood alone in Marcus's, now her office. She ran her hand over the cool mahogany of the desk where her life had been shattered. The view of the city was the same, but the woman looking out was entirely different. Her phone buzzed. It was David Chen, her head of R&D. "The board approved the acquisition," he said. "Welcome to the top floor, boss." "We have a lot of work to do," Nora replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The first order of business is a name change. Pex is dead. From now on, it's all Phoenix." The ashes had been cleared. The past had been avenged. Her name was cleared. And from this high vantage point, on the foundation of her enemy's ruin, she was finally ready to build her empire.